Good morning, everybody. Come on, better than that. Good morning, everybody. Hi, my name is Lou Davis, and I'm going to be guiding you through the morning as best I can. There are some changes that have been made in the program, and I'm told that there are 3 busloads of United Seniors who are still on the way. Some of them are very close, and some of them will be coming in as we go on with the program. But we thought we should start because some of our speakers have to be at the legislature at 10 o'clock or shortly thereafter. Why don't we get right off to it and start with the Pledge of Allegiance with Coast Guard Artillerist Mr. David Silverstein leading us. Please stand. To lead us in America the Beautiful. Kate Smith. Please remain standing now for the Star Spangled Banner. Led by Mr. Gordon Brown.
I don't use accompaniment because that means I can start it where I want to. Your heart is not over here, it's right to left of center. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket red glare, the bomb bursting in the air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you.
Just a couple of housekeeping things. Just a couple of housekeeping things. You all know where the restrooms are. They're in the hallway, right outside the doors to the auditorium. They're asking us no food or drink in the auditorium. And there are still more people to come. Still a couple of busloads before we're going to start. And our first speaker, I have, as Master of Ceremonies here, I have the job of introducing people who need no introduction. However, I'll do it anyway. The Honorable Michael E. Busch is Speaker of the House of Delegates. He is the longest serving Speaker in the history of the House of Delegates. As of this year, has been in the legislature for a lot of years, 26 years. And on his right is the minority leader of the House, delegate from Charles County, the minority, Southern Maryland, minority leader of the House of Delegates, Delegate Tony O'Donnell. I'd also like to introduce Len Lazarick, who will be leading the questioning in the next part of the ceremony. Len is the editor and the publisher of MarylandReporter.com. He's formerly State House Bureau Chief of the Daily Baltimore Examiner, but at MarylandReporter.com is something that you should all probably be interested in. You can go online, get into MarylandReporter.com, and it's probably the best daily summary of what is going on, not only here in Annapolis at the legislature, but in Maryland, and it's accessible to everybody. Matt, I'll let you take over the program now.
Thank you, Lou, for the plug. As you can see, the Speaker of the House has things in common with you. His gray hair, like much of the leadership in the House of Delegates, 3 of the committee chairs are senior citizens. You're almost a senior citizen, right, Mr. Speaker?
I think 65 qualifies.
Oh, okay. He's 65. What should this group of senior citizens take away from this year's budget in terms of how it will impact them?
First of all, it's a pleasure to be here this morning, and it's great that everyone stays engaged in the governmental process. I think the most important thing is that each and every one come down here today, make contact with your individual legislator, know what let that legislator know what your individual concerns are, and they might be many and varied. But it's important because this is a participatory activity. You have to participate and make sure your legislators know exactly what you want for a representative democracy. Now, the question in hand was the budget that is before us and what concerns there might be out there. First and foremost, the state of Maryland, like every other state, has to balance their budget. So at the end of the day, we have to balance our budget. And we try to keep a certain amount in the savings account for the rainy day fund, which guarantees us a AAA bond rating, which gives us a low interest rate. We're one of 9 states, I believe, right now that still have a AAA bond rating in this country, which means you're considered fiscally sound by the rating agencies in New York City. This year's budget is a challenge. It's a $1.1 billion deficit. Last year, we went through the tough decisions of asking state employees to pay more for their pension program, a 5% to 7% contribution. We asked retirees to pay higher co-pays for the prescription drugs. And we made those determinations because we had to get our fiscal liability for pension liability in order. We saved the state about $100 million on a year-to-year basis, but we put ourselves in line with the recommendations that the bonding agencies had with the association known as GASB. But this year's budget, we're trying to protect, first and foremost, the education dollars and local aid. We have a $15 billion general fund budget, $15 billion. $6.5 billion goes directly to local government. $5.8 billion of that is K-12 education. As you know, we have been ranked number 1 in the country 4 years in a row for our K-12 education system. Why is that important? Because in recessionary times, USA Today had an article that those with a college degree, our unemployment rate in this country is 5%. For those with a high school degree, it's 10%. And those with neither, it's 15%. One of the reasons that Maryland's unemployment rate is 2 points below the national average is because we have a well-educated workforce. We depend on a research-based economy. So we invest a lot of money in education. We invest $1.5 billion into our colleges and our university systems. We have great public universities. University of Maryland is one of the finest research public universities in the country today. You have Johns Hopkins University is one of the finest private research universities in the country today. We put $3.5 billion into Medicaid. What does that pay for? That pays for nursing home reimbursement, pays for hospital costs, pays physicians who provide Medicaid. The patients who can't afford health care. Many seniors are not only Medicare but Medicaid eligible. So when we talk about Medicaid dollars, and $3.5 billion is our half of $3.5 billion comes from the federal government. 80% of those dollars go to senior citizens, developmentally disabled, and mentally challenged individuals. Almost 80 to 90% of the people in a lot of our nursing homes are Medicaid funded because people haven't spent down to qualify for Medicaid to afford to be in nursing homes. So the vast majority of that money goes in that direction. We try to protect that money in the budget. So one of our goals is to protect that $3.5 billion. So if you're counting at home, 6.5 to local government, 3.5 to Medicaid, that's $10 billion with a $15 billion budget. We put 1.5 in the higher ed, that is 5 out of 15 billion. Put 1.2 billion in corrections. You have prisons, you have prison guards, you have public safety, your EMS, and medical services. You have the best shock trauma system in the country. That's all paid for through the general fund budget in that area. So the other portion pays for your salaries, your benefits, your health care for your state employees. Right now, per capita, our state employees are the lowest per capita since 1973. When the budget projections were made at the end of the previous governor's term, our projections were we would be at an $18 billion budget today. We're only at $15 billion. That's mainly because the recessionary period took place on Wall Street. But we try to protect the senior citizen programs, developmentally disabled, as well as fully fund our education system. So I'll leave it at that.
Delegate O'Donnell, would you like to talk about this year's budget and its impact on these folks out in the audience?
Sure, I would. And first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me today. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. And we know that you'll have meetings with your delegations and senators across the day. And I will tell you that you are a very important group of citizens of this state, and the entire General Assembly takes your presence here very, very seriously. And that's why the Speaker and I wanted to come and talk to you this morning. I have somewhat, obviously, of a different perspective on things, and so I'd like to share that with you with regard to the budget. It's true that we have a lot of good things going for us in this state. Absolutely true. What we can't do is overextend ourselves to the point that we threaten everything. And we should also endeavor to do no harm in our budgeting. And I think that we're on the verge of doing some of that. And so we need to tighten our belt a little bit to make sure we don't go too far down that path and hurt you and hurt other citizens of this state and jeopardize our priorities for the future. One of the things that I think puts seniors at particular risk is the fact that many seniors are on fixed incomes. Many seniors, I know my own mother, who was retired prior to her passing, lived on Social Security. Her expenses were not fixed, but her income was. And it made it very difficult, you know, when prices increased, when real estate taxes went up, when the cost of food or gas or medicines went up. And we should make sure at the state level that we're not spending too much so that we put those kind of pressures on some seniors who are struggling to get by on fixed income. We're borrowing a lot of money right now in our capital budget, and that's fine. We should probably have a healthy program, but we got to make sure we don't overextend ourselves. We're bumping up against our borrowing limitations with regard to building capital infrastructure in this state. So, what does that mean? Our state constitution requires the property tax to cover the debt service on those monies that we're borrowing. If we don't have enough revenues coming in from the state property tax, we have to do one of two things. We have to spend more money out of the general fund to pay that debt service, or we have to raise your property tax. Raising property tax on seniors on fixed income is harmful, obviously, to many who are struggling to make ends meet. So we have to be careful we're not spending too much money in our capital budget, and we are projected to have to raise several $100 million over the next 2 years just to cover the debt service of the monies we're borrowing right now. Additionally, we're looking at revenue streams right now in this coming budget that could hurt you. I'm talking about a gas tax, talking about a flush tax, talking about vehicle registration fee increases, talking about a sales tax increase, talking about many other things that could be very regressive and very detrimental to your fixed income. And as seniors, you have to be careful. Now, some seniors have planned well. Some seniors can handle it. Many of you are probably in that, but others are going to struggle. And when that gas tax goes up, it drives the food cost up. And when the food cost goes up, and the flush tax goes up, and the sales tax goes up, and all these fees and taxes continue to go up, they're going to struggle to pay it. So part of our job, part of my job, is to temper our zeal to continue to spend money. The state's budget is not $15 billion. The state's budget is $35.8 billion. The operating the general fund, which is only one part of the budget, is $15 billion, but the state's operating budget that we're going to vote on here in a couple months is $35.8 billion. Additionally, we have $18 billion of unfunded liabilities in our state retiree pension system, and we have $10 billion of unfunded liabilities in retiree health care benefits. So we have a lot of obligations that are out there. We need to temper things down. There's a lot of taxes included in this budget that are going to hurt people and stifle our economy, and we're going to endeavor to reduce that spending. I think a lot of my colleagues, by the way, on the other side of the aisle, agree with tempering some of this stuff and not raising incomes on people, for instance, income taxes and removing deductions on people as far down as $100,000 a year income. So
Mr. Speaker, as head of the overwhelming Democratic majority in the House of Delegates, what is your point of view? Which of these proposed taxes do you think you're going to be able to get through?
Well, first and foremost, I'll start with the budget, and just as a clarification, our general fund budget is $15 billion. That's what we work off of. The $35 billion that the minority leader is talking about is money that we get from the federal government, money goes to the Transportation Trust Fund. That is not part of the money that we deal with balancing our budget. Our budget is balanced off our income tax, which you pay. It's paid on the sales tax, corporate taxes, the alcohol tax, lottery and gaming revenues. But the other money is money that you are taxed at the federal level, comes back to us in transportation, almost $10 billion comes back from the federal government. I don't know that anybody wants to leave that off the table. Our overall budget does grow every year. That's because our population grows. We are a state of 5.8 million people today. But our general fund budget, where we talk about balancing our budget and the programs that the state directly provides to counties and programs, is $15 billion. We're not shifting the money around from the federal government that comes back to us. That's that match for Medicaid. So I just want to make a clarification there. What we are is about $1.1 billion short of the $15 billion. So the governor brings in his budget, it's a proposal. And then it's to be fine-tuned by the General Assembly. There'll be a debate on both sides of the aisle. A lot of breakdown on geographic areas as well about where there should be cuts and where there should be revenues. The governor proposed $615 million worth of revenue cuts and shifts. One is to send the teacher pension money back to the counties, so counties would share in the pension liability for teachers. Currently, the state picks up the entire pension cost for teachers, which is about $1 billion a year. Salaries for teachers are set at the local level. The question is, should there be some kind of collaborative effort on that liability? Should locals who raise their salaries have some of the responsible liability for pensions that are paid? So he suggested that $240 million go back to the counties. He suggested that some of the Medicaid programs and the cost at the hospitals should be absorbed. We have an all-payer system. That takes care of most of the $615 million. It has $404 million worth of revenues. The larger portion of that is to limit exemptions. So in other words, if you make $100,000, he's asking you that you only get 90% of your exemptions, your charitable contributions, your mortgage, things of that nature. Make $200,000, they can ask you to only get 80% of those exemptions. That not only helps the state budget, but also provides about $110 million in aid to local subdivisions to help offset the cost of the pension shift. So that's what the governor has in his budget, plus he has $20 million tax over loose tobacco, which is premium cigars, chew. If you put something between your cheek and gum, I guess the cost will go up for that. As well as where cigarettes are. Online sales would raise about 20. Tax on online sales, the same as sales tax, would go up to about $21 million. And there's a $50 million one-time contribution from the Injured Workers Insurance Fund for them to gain independence as an insurance company. That is part of the equation. But that's the governor's proposal. Now, over the next 80 days, it's our job to fine-tune that. Our job as leaders, both in the Democratic and Republican Party, come up with ideas. If you don't like those, come up with other ideas. That's our job. That's why they sent us here. But at the end of that 90-day period of time, unlike the federal government, we have to balance the budget. We have to find $1.1 billion in either cuts or revenues to balance the budget. Now, as I gave you the categories, $6.5 billion goes to local government. We cut local education, we cut the libraries, we cut police aid, we cut community college. $1.5 billion goes to higher education. We cut higher education and raise tuition. Right now, the state of Virginia is raising tuition costs in all the public universities. Pennsylvania cut higher ed 20%. Or fewer and fewer kids can afford to go to college. The other is Medicaid, $3.5 billion Medicaid. Are we doing that? We're going to take people saying they no longer qualify for health care? Not going to let you go into nursing homes? Close down nursing homes, we're going to do that? I don't think so. And then the other is corrections, $1.2 million. I mean, other states have decided that they're letting prisoners out of prison. California, they're letting them out. I don't think we want to do that in the state of Maryland. So it comes down to, where do you find the cuts? Last year we asked state employees to pay more money. The average state employee makes $45,000 a year, that's the median income. The average median income in the state of Maryland is $69,000 a year. We have the highest median income of any state in the union. The state trooper today starts at $39,000 a year. We're not staying in line to get those jobs. $39,000. Hard to make them on that. So I don't think we're going to cut state workforce any further. So we either have to come up with further cuts in those categories, or you have to come up with revenues. In my estimation, at the end of the day, there'll be a combination of both.
But what about the governor's proposals? Are there any elements of them that any part of them that you're going to have difficulty passing in the House?
I think everything's going to be difficult.
Tony, what's your Delegate O'Donnell? What's your assessment of which of these tax increases might have a chance of passing, or all?
Yeah, well, I suspect that all of them have a chance of passing, but it's a matter of which one should pass and how much people are willing to buck the system around here and say, no, this doesn't make sense for my citizens. I know some people who are willing to buck the system, who are willing to stand up to power and say, hey, I have my say too. But it's a matter of how many of them. Look, the reality is our budget is $35.8 billion, and it's comprised of a lot of different things. General fund, special funds, federal funds, they all come together and they make our budget. And sometimes we take money from Pot A and stick it into Pot B. For instance, we take money from the Transportation Trust Fund and stick it in the General Fund. Or we take money from the transfer tax on real estate in the state that used to be used to pay for program open space, and we shove it into the General Fund. But those monies are fungible. The state treasurer's here and she knows that. That money moves across those pots, general fund, special fund, federal funds. But in the end, ladies and gentlemen, it's all taxpayer dollars. We can categorize it any way we want, which pot it is, which pot it isn't. But Senator Muse and Speaker Busch and myself, when we vote on the state's budget, we don't vote on the general fund and have a separate vote on the federal funds and separate vote on the special funds. We vote on the state's budget. There's one bill. It's negotiated, it's submitted by the governor, it's negotiated between the Senate and the House, and we passed the entire bill. And that thing has been it started out 6 years ago at $28 billion. Then it went up $1 billion to 29. Then it went up $1.5 billion to 31. So, right? The budget that was submitted by the governor the other day is $35.8 billion. And that's all our funding, all the state's operating costs. It's not bricks and mortars, it's not our capital budget, but it's the operating budget of the state, and it's all taxpayer dollars. And we have to be careful that we're not overspending for the future. And that's what I submit that we are. Now, in terms of these taxes, we can talk about which ones are going to pass, but I got to tell you, we're in a down economy. And if we continue to spend the way we've been spending, you know, ladies and gentlemen, you know you're going to be hurt. And so is the state in the long run. The federal government's going to retrench. It cannot sustain the debt that's accumulating there. Go to usdebtclock.org. Take a look at the national debt. It's $16 trillion, and there's no throttle. They're accumulating that national debt. That clock is ringing up so fast it makes my head spin. And I'm not pointing the finger, because all parties have been part of this. What I'm saying is our country's future is at stake. We can't continue to rack up the debt and spend money like there's no tomorrow. We got to get a handle on it.
Let's switch to another topic. I think you've both given your positions on that, but I think a lot of these people would be interested in where your parties stand on the same-sex marriage, which was introduced last night by the governor. I believe this year it's called the Civil Marriage Protection Act. You want to start with that, Delegate O'Donnell? Is your caucus taking a position on this?
Yeah, we have. Last year we voted to support the definition of marriage as being what it is currently, and that is between one man and one woman. And we are strongly against it. I will also tell you this, that the governor has made it a chief legislative priority this year, which could change the balance. It was very close in the House last year. The bill did not pass the House. But if it is to pass, and we're going to fight, we're going to have a good, reasoned debate. It was a very good debate last year. We're going to have it again this year. But if it does pass, it will pass by the slimmest of margins, and then I predict that it will be promptly petitioned to referendum and will be on the ballot in 2012, which makes for a very volatile election, by the way. So that's what I predict will happen. It has never been passed, even in California when it was put to the citizens for passage or defeat. Not one state where the citizens have had a referendum as it passed. Thanks.
Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, I'll agree with the minority leader on this. I think if in fact the bill is passed, it will go to referendum. The issue is, as a representative of the government, not a representative of the church, whether people have the same rights under civil law. And that is a question of civil rights as far as I'm concerned. Civil rights has been valid for a long time. And it's government's responsibility to make sure that every person has the same civil rights. And it shouldn't impose on anyone's religious belief. There's a separation between church and state. If the Catholic Church doesn't want to marry same-sex couples, they have every right not to do that. But the same rights and responsibilities should be granted to everyone. And I say responsibilities as well. Now here's the practical application. Currently right now in Washington, D.C., people can get married in the civil ceremony if they're the same sex. The Attorney General of the state of Maryland says that they will have the full rights of a married couple when they come back to the state of Maryland. I have not seen any adverse problems within Washington, D.C. or within the state of Maryland since this has taken place. But I think it will be a very close vote in the House. I think if in fact it is passed, it will go to referendum. Currently, if you read the polls, and I don't always trust the polls, but the fact of the matter is it's very close among the electorate in the state of Maryland. But I think this issue has come a long way, and I think the people that have seen the switch to supporting it have seen this issue as a civil rights issue, as I do. Thank you very much.
The House of Delegates is supposed to start at 10 a.m., although it doesn't usually start until the Speaker goes up on the rostrum.
If they see the minority leader and I walking in together, they're always suspects.
Yeah.
We're very worried.
As a last question, in terms of things that will impact the seniors here, the Delegate O'Donnell's already brought up the flush tax and the gasoline tax. The governor has has not taken an official position on that. As the last question, where do you think we're going to wind up on those two taxes that virtually everybody in this room will be impacted by? And throw in your closing statement as well.
Look, I'm not exactly sure. I know one thing for a fact, that we will end up balancing the budget. And within that budget, there will be revenue increases for all its cuts. The other issue, whether there's a transportation revenue or not to go to building and construction of roads, is whether there's going to be support for local subdivisions that need the projects to come down here and encourage their delegations to go forward with something. In other areas, it's a question of what the priority is. But I can tell you in this period of time, the governor put $370 million of money into school construction. We're one of only a handful of states that actually help counties with school construction. And those school construction dollars that we put in leverage $500 million of local money, which means there's close to $1 billion worth of construction jobs and 10,000 jobs. I think when we leave here, our capital budget can help create jobs in the construction trade, which is 20% below where they normally are. Each of those projects creates a community benefit, a school, a road, a library, a hospital. I mean, we put a lot of money into the hospital system for construction. The reason we have great hospitals is because the state contributes as well. $40-some million for Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland. You know, the shock trauma system is funded through the state, through your registration fees. It's the best insurance policy anybody has. So all those issues are benefits that we provide. But I would say one thing to the seniors, and I know my good friend is running for Congress, but your biggest fear is going to come from the federal government. You know, we have two great programs in this country, Medicare and Social Security. My mother and my mother-in-law both married to veterans of World War II. Both are widows. Both live off Social Security. They haven't had an increase in 2 years. They see their Medicare programs going up. Now, if you want to find out what's going to take place in Washington, D.C., if there's a radical change, all you have to do is look at Wisconsin. They took rights away from people. What's taking place in Virginia, when they're starting to put roads up for naming rights. That was the governor's suggestion. So if you want to come in and be the Constellation Key Highway Bridge, and you can find some corporation who wants to pay that kind of money for it, go ahead. If you want people down here to look after your rights, maybe not everything that you think you should get, but in a fair and equitable fashion, you're going to have to make that judgment on your own as you go around here today and find out what's in that budget. So I thank you for having me today. I thank you for letting me be a senior citizen. Remember, I'm not old, I've just been around a long time. I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, so I better be around for much longer time. Thank you very much.
Looks like they will walk over together, hand in hand.
I appreciate it, and look, Speaker's a good man, and we both have hard, tough jobs. But that's what makes American democracy work. It's not one way or the other, but it's the coming together of ideas and back and forth, the healthy tension. Single-party systems in the history of the world have been terrible failures, and we cherish our ability to have different ideas. And so I think it's important to note that we need jobs in this country. We need a healthy economy. I called a friend of mine over the holidays, and he owns a major construction firm in La Plata, Maryland. He helped rebuild that town when the tornado came through there some years ago. And we all from Southern Maryland know who I'm talking about. He told me, he said, Tony, I'm moving my business out of the state. I can't take it anymore. It's a construction firm, major East Coast. He said, I'm going to Northern Virginia, I'm going to Florida, I'm tired of it. I said, what can I do? What can I do to help keep you here? He said, you try. It's not your fault. He said, I'm tired of the state of Maryland kicking me when I provide hundreds of jobs and I'm a good citizen and I love the state. Bechtel Corporation, 1961, the company was formed, homegrown company here in the state, moving to Northern Virginia. They're done. Northrop Grumman, located in Northern Virginia, didn't come here. Why? Because we're not friendly. We're not friendly. be careful to have good jobs in this state. And let me tell you, we do have challenges at the federal level. The Speaker alluded to them. But the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff recently said, Admiral Mike Mullen recently said that the biggest threat to U.S. national security and to Social Security and to Medicare, he didn't say this, I'm adding these on, it's true, but he said the biggest threat to national security is the national debt. He didn't say it was cyber attacks or a nuke in Iran or North Korea or 2 wars or any of this stuff. He said it was the national debt. Why? Because Admiral Mullen knows that we can't pay for our national security or our Social Security or our Medicaid systems if we go the way of Greece. And if we go the way of Greece, we will have betrayed previous generations of yours and will betray future generations too. So I say we need to get a handle on this thing. We need to rein it in. We don't need to stop it. We just need to get a handle on it and be realistic about what the future of this country is. Thank you all for letting me speak today.
This cup is priceless. And the only way you can get it is to come speak here before the group.
I want to thank Len Lazarick and Lou Davis for putting this on as well. They're both senior citizens. They told me to say that.
Lou and I are the co-deans of the press corps. Lou is older than me.
Thank you both. Thank you both.
Now the names for the speaker and
This is a typical Annapolis event because we're running way behind schedule. I'd like to introduce now someone I consider a friend. Nancy Kopp is the treasurer of the state of Maryland. The treasurer basically takes care of our money, invests it, what to do with it once the state gets it. Another interesting thing about the treasurer of the state of Maryland is that she is elected by the legislature. She is the legislature's representative on the Board of Public Works, which, I don't know how you do that. But it's been, and Nancy Kopp is also, I believe, one of the founding members of the Women's Caucus that is celebrating the 40th anniversary of its foundation, its founding this year.
Lou didn't mention it, but the treasurer is filling in today for Comptroller Peter Franchot, who is apparently under the weather. But the treasurer and the comptroller both serve together in the House of Delegates, representing fairly liberal districts in Montgomery County. The treasurer still lives in Bethesda. And of those two people, though, I think it's safe to say that the treasurer is still a liberal Democrat, as opposed to the controller. So, what is your perspective on the governor's budget? Among the treasurer's duties, and probably where you hear her quoted the most, is she's one of 3 members of the Board of Public Works, which is an unusual institution, unique to Maryland, as a matter of fact, where it's 3 members, the governor chairs it, the comptroller, who's independently elected by the voters, and the state treasurer get to vote on all major contracts and a bunch of other things. So they all pay a lot of attention to the budget. And what's your reaction to the governor's budget? And obviously you can say some opening remarks too.
Thanks, Len. I want to thank you all for having me. As Len pointed out, I obviously am not Peter Franchot. I've known him for a long time, and I know I'm not Peter Franchot. Peter has the flu, and would very much like to be here, I'm quite sure, much rather than where he is. But he and I worked very closely together, and so I think it was sort of became natural to say, well, if one can't come, what about the other? The question I'm always asked when I go out anywhere is, in fact, what is the difference between the comptroller and the treasurer? And I assume by that people don't mean, is he a guy from Montgomery County and you're a woman from Montgomery County, but what is the function of the office? And very basically, although he may not agree with this, the basic function of the office of comptroller is to collect the taxes and then keep the book of the state, the book of record accounts of the state. And the basic core function of the treasurer is to invest the funds that come in and then make sure that the money in the bank is reconciled with the money on the comptroller's books. And that's the basic core function. But of course there are many other functions. And among them, we both serve, the comptroller and I, with the governor on the Board of Public Works, a body which meets every other week to approve essentially all of the contracts, the major contracts, procurements of the state, sales of state lands or wood or whatever, if there are things for sale, and when the legislature is not in session, to vote to cut the state budget in order to keep it balanced. And in the last term of office, we cut several $1 billion and reduced several thousand, a few thousand jobs, many of which were vacant. But of course, as you know, when you erase a vacant job, it just means the folks who are left have to work a little harder because the demands don't go down. But that's the Board of Public Works. And what's interesting, as Len pointed out, is because the treasurer is one of 5 throughout the nation that is elected by the legislature, instead of being appointed by the governor or elected at large, it means the legislature. Well, let me step back. The governor, as you know, has a very strong voice in the Maryland budget. The governor hands down a budget. The legislature can cut it, but they cannot move things around in it, and they can't add to it. They can cut it and suggest to the governor that he use the funds that were cut for a legislative priority, but that's about all they can do directly. They can do a lot of things indirectly, and I spent 27 years doing that. And you can get things done, but the governor has a very strong budgetary authority. On the other hand, Maryland is the only state with a board like the Board of Public Works, which has to approve the actual spending of the money, the actual contracts, decide exactly how the money is going to be spent. And it's done by the Board of Public Works in public. Every 2 weeks, we're on the internet now, and through the Board of Public Works device, the legislature actually has a stronger voice in the actual administration of government, the funding of government, than in almost any other state. Because in most states, these decisions are made behind closed doors in the executive branch. Not necessarily made badly, but they're not made with the same transparency and accountability. So Maryland is quite unique in that regard, and that uniqueness, part of a much broader, prudent system of fund management, of public finance, is what has earned us the AAA bond rating from all 3 rating agencies ever since they started rating bonds. That just to give you a little idea of what we do. The state treasurer is in charge of borrowing money from the public in order to construct buildings. Most of the money at the state level goes to school construction, but we also, of course, do prisons and other facilities. And the treasurer also is in charge of investing the cash flow of the state, about $6 or $7 billion a year that just keeps the state government running. We invest very short term. The comptroller and I also sit on the board of the pension system for state teachers and employees. I'm chairing it and he's the vice chair of it. That's at the moment about a $36 billion fund, broadly invested, and especially after the reform of last year, really in relatively quite good shape compared to many other public funds. It actually was before the reforms. It's even stronger now. Now, to get back to answer your question, now that you have some idea of who it is who's answering it, I do those functions. I do not have a role in writing nor approving the budget formally, although I did have a hand in it for 27 years. And I would only iterate what the speaker and minority leader said. We're going to have a balanced budget. We are not giving up the priorities of the state, which traditionally have been education and basic safety net. We have cut a great deal. Much of the federal money, it is true, the budget writ whole is both federal, state, and then the general funded part that's funded by state taxes. But we're not going to cut the federal amount. Federal amount has been growing. People talk about the budget growing, so the federal amount has been growing, not just because of the stimulus, but because it is basically directed to two things. One is transportation, the other is health, and you all know as well as anybody else that health expenditures have been going up, and so the federal funding for Medicaid has been going up too, and that really is as much of the cost driver in the budget as anything else. I imagine that some of the proposed taxes or fees will go through. I certainly think they should, personally, but that's not my role anymore. But I'm not sure that all of them will, and I'm not sure in the area of transportation, we are stuck on the gas tax. That's all we've ever looked at, and one of the problems with the gas tax is it's tax per gallon. It's not like the sales tax that goes up with inflation. It doesn't. So as more and more people like me are driving little Honda Civics and not going to the gas station as often, we're not paying the gas tax as much, even though the needs of the roads are very great. Ironically, I was just visiting in southern Maryland, in the Eastern Shore last week, the site of a terrible intersection that really should be replaced by an overpass. There's no question about it. Young boy was killed there 4 months ago. Others have been killed before. It's very dangerous, but it costs $50 or $60 million. And the representatives of that area find it difficult to vote for increased taxes. So that's the issue that we're facing. And that's what the legislature's going to be struggling with.
Well, I'm glad you actually volunteered some of your opinion about taxes, but it occurs to me, I was actually prepared to ask Peter Franchot a bunch of very different questions, but because he has a very different opinion about taxes, but we're not going to debate him in absentia. That there is one tax that you have potentially a role in, and that is the state property tax. And one of the things that's been brought up with the increased use of debt to fund projects that have been formally paid to is that you might be forced to raise the state property tax, which is a very small percentage of overall property taxes. But talk about the debt and the state property tax.
The state debt, as I mentioned, we borrow, and I'm talking mostly now about the general obligation bonds of the state. Those are the funds, about $1 billion a year, give or take, some that go for school construction, university construction, some roads, prisons, and health facilities. That's the basic infrastructure of the state. And we have a system. One of the reasons we have a AAA rating still, we hope we will keep it despite the federal government, which is another interesting line of questioning. But one of the reasons we have it is we have a rather strict system of limiting debt. The spending affordability, the capital debt affordability systems are integral parts of our financial system. The Capital Debt Affordability Committee, which I chair, looks every year at the needs of the state and at potential borrowing. And we have set tests for how much is affordable. These tests are very similar to other states. They've stood the test of time. The test is basically you don't want any more debt outstanding than 4% of the state wealth, and you don't want debt service in the general fund budget to be any more than 8% of the relevant revenue coming in. So you get a handle on it, and it's relatively stable. Unfortunately, when the price of a building goes up, that means you build fewer schools. And times when the cost of building goes down, you want to take advantage of that, build more, employ more people. These are all things that you're going to need. The school's falling apart. You've got to do something about it. And by the way, it goes not only for building new schools, obviously, but for repairing and renovating. So we are keeping within those constraints. There's no question about that. Now, the other issue is how much it costs to pay the debt service. It could be still within 8% of the relevant taxes, but be more than the state property tax as it is set now brings in. It's now at 11 cents per $100. It's a small tax. But it is set aside in the Constitution to be used only to pay debt service. That does not mean that general funds can't be used. In fact, they have been used as recently as the Ehrlich administration. Not only were general funds used, but they then raised the property tax from 8 cents to 13. It's since been brought down to 11. Next year, that is for the budget that starts July 2013, we may be faced with a situation in which you either move money over from the general fund, or you have to raise the property tax back to where it was under Ehrlich in order to pay the debt service. Now, you don't know for sure because so much depends on interest rates and depends on premiums. People actually pay the state a premium to buy our bonds. So we have not had to borrow money from the general fund for the last several years. But the bottom line question, it seems to me, whether you do it by, and the property tax, unlike all other taxes, is set by the Board of Public Works. So it's the governor, the comptroller, and the treasurer. But the fact of the matter is you wait until the state budget passes through the legislature in April, and then if the funds in the reserve to pay the debt service are sufficient, you leave the tax where it is, or you cut it, as Governor O'Malley did. And if it is not sufficient, in the general funds, if they didn't raise the general funds to do it, then those three people have to set the property tax at a rate that is sufficient to pay the debt. I haven't looked recently. Several years ago, 1 penny was the equivalent of $25 on the average house in Maryland. I will look to see what it is and get back through you because it's just information everybody ought to know.
I'm curious in the audience, how many people here are retired state employees or retired teachers? Could I have a show of hands on that? Okay, we've got a lot of people there. Do they have any reason to be concerned about their pensions and the viability of the pension system? We hear a lot of talk about that.
No, I don't think so. Actually, I think because of the action that was taken last year, the one thing they can feel sure of is that there is going to be a defined benefit system. There will be pensions. We right now before the reform, had enough money to continue paying out for about till about 2060. Anyhow, so regretfully, I don't think any of us have a lot to worry about. But it's even stronger. It's even stronger now. Now it was at the price of present employees putting more money into their pensions from their salaries, and for new employees getting a lower benefit, and for all employees, active employees, potentially having a lower COLA than a COLA, but a lower COLA than they did in the past. And with those reforms, no. Unlike, we looked at the question actually of shutting down the pension system for all new people and putting in a contributory retirement savings program instead. It ended up costing the employer, all of us, the taxpayers, more, and of course brought much less to the retired employee. Right now, the typical state pension is $20,000, by the way. It's not what you read about like in California or Illinois, these people who are getting hundreds of thousands. The only people who get significantly larger pensions basically are athletic coaches, and they really have just a contract, so it's not the typical state pension. And the doctors who both teach at the medical school and are on the staff of University Hospital. State employees about 20.
You mentioned Greece, at least I believe you did. In terms of the
No, I did not. I believe that Mr. O'Donnell mentioned Greece.
Oh, okay. All right.
We are not all in the same situation as Greece.
But talk about the bond rating agencies have become kind of a political issue, especially with the downgrading of U.S. bonds, and that might have had an impact on us and what we were paying. Talk about that a little bit, because you have constant dealings with these rating agencies.
Well, first of all, there's something a little ironic about what you just said, Len, and the price that we were paying, because I'll mention that in a moment. But yeah, I mean, quite candidly, this is just Nancy Comp talking. I think that the bond rating agencies are particularly sensitive because they were jumped all over because of the credit crunch and Lehman Brothers and everything going down, and it was.
Because they said these are great bonds.
So they said they were great bonds, they were AAA rated bonds, and then they went down the drain and people lost money. So they have become much more aggressive. I mean, that's the background. The thing that impacts us most and that is most frustrating is that the rating agencies, most particularly Moody's, but also Standard & Poor's, are looking at the United States government and are saying Maryland and Virginia are so close to the United States seat of government, and there are so many federal employees and contractors in Maryland and Virginia that if we downgrade the United States, we are going to have to put Maryland and Virginia on watch and potentially downgrade them. This is what we're arguing against. Now they turn around and say, you are in very good shape, Maryland and Virginia. You've got, and as I said, in Maryland they point to the spending affordability system, the capital debt affordability system, the fact that we have limited capital debt, the fact that we have actually a diverse workforce, the best trained workforce in the United States, a lot of strengths. And they said, everything you do, you're AAA rated state, no question about it, but we don't know about the federal government. Now, we are in constant conversation with these folks, making out several points. One of which is, yes, we do have a larger federal presence than a lot of other states in that we do have federal employees. It's less than 6% of our folk, of the workforce in the United States, in Maryland. But when you count contractors and people who work at the restaurants where the federal employees eat and everything, it's more than that, but it's not a huge amount. Yes, we do have a lot of federal money and installations and contracts, but they are also very diverse. And here's Maryland's strength, actually, compared to Virginia. We've got the health institutions, we've got the military bases, we've got the cyber technology. We have a great diversity and are not simply focused in one institution. We also have outstandingly well-educated people who are very versatile and can move around more than in many other states. Plus, because we have this great workforce and a lot of other things, including federal support, no question about it, we are one of the wealthiest states in the nation. Because federal programs are often funded inversely to wealth, federal funds, therefore, are a smaller part of the Maryland budget, and we are less dependent on them than in many states, like Mississippi, Alabama, etc. And in fact, when you look at the cuts that are being proposed, nobody's made them yet, but all sorts of people are proposing them, they impact many of these other states more seriously than they impact Maryland. Of course, we've got to wait and see exactly what these cuts are and what's going to happen. But you can understand why we are all very frustrated when they make these statements about Maryland, and in fact put Maryland on watch because they say specifically we are watching the United States of America. Now the ironic thing, Len, is they came out last July. They gave us a AAA rating, and at the same day said they were putting us on watch because of the United States. We went to market 3 days later, and we got the lowest, the best rates, either the best or the second best we have ever gotten. There was a flight to quality from the United States to the state of Maryland. So how has it impacted us? It's not easy to say. But it's something where we simply think the rating agencies are trying so hard to cover themselves, they're just wrong.
Well, I just got a question from the audience, which I'm having trouble reading, but actually, no, I'm going to control the questions from up here. Something about the Taft-Hartley Act. I'm sorry, if I had a chance more to digest this, because I'm not going to ask a question that I don't understand. So, my last question is, talking to this group of senior citizens, and I didn't mention this to the speaker, I mean, it's pretty obvious that the treasurer is a senior citizen as well. So,
68 last month. 68 last month.
68 last month. And she still has a day job. Is there anything? Is there anything that you would like to tell this group as you wrap up here, filling in for the comptroller?
Filling in for the comptroller. No, except that I do respect USM very much. Worked for years with you all, and I think your priorities are right on target as far as I'm concerned. I only hope when you go around, because you do have great moral suasion. I mean, people listen to you and respect your being here, that you will also put in a word, as you have in the past, for the next generation. And not be seen as people who are coming around only for their own finance. I know you're not, but don't be seen as people coming only for your own financial security or gain, but as people who understand what a community is and how important our investment in our children and their future are. That is our future. You all know that. I mean, I am greatly interested in those kids coming out of high school right now because I want them to be around to take care of me. But also for their own benefit and their own sake. We are a community, and people forget about that sometimes. And I think it's just very important that folks like you with great moral suasion remind your legislators that they are elected to look out not only for the loudest voice in their districts right now, but sometimes for the quietest voices, and sometimes for those who are not even there yet, but we hope will be. Maryland's made great strides in environmental protection. We don't want to give that up. We want to bequeath to our children, I think, a healthy environment, a strong school system, a strong community, and well-supported elderly folks like us. And you can have all that. You can't have it for free, though. And that's where the tough decisions have to be made.
Let's have a hand for Clerk Treasurer Nancy Cox as she gets her complimentary mug.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Nancy. Madam Treasurer. Our next speaker also needs no introduction. I've been coming here 3 years, and for 3 years I've been introducing the Secretary of the Department of Aging. The Department of Aging, of course, is the organization that advocates for you folks, for the administration. And the Secretary of the Department of the Aging is former legislator, former delegate, former senator, and now the Secretary, Gloria Lawlah.
Thank you. Good morning, United States. All right, you're looking good. You know, I love listening to Nancy Cox because I never, ever leave her presence that I don't learn something new about money and how it's invested and the budget, all the things that we want to know more about. She is wonderful. I'm glad to know that she's identifying with us as a senior. And that's Mike Miller and Mike Busch. So we're almost there now. I know our governor's a little bit younger, but he's catching on too. I have some good news from him this morning. So Ted, where's Ted? I want to congratulate you for your fine leadership of United Senior. And let me just say this to you. You know, when we go up in those offices, of course they're going to listen to us because we vote. We are the best voters sitting out there. And that vote is powerful. You hear me? This is an election year. And then, as we know, our governor's in his second term, so 2014 is another election year. So I know that, you know, people are going to be listening to what we have to say. And seniors deserve to be listened to. We are the foundation of this great nation, and we have paid our dues. Paid our dues. You know, I went home back down in Newberry, South Carolina, and I went to see the former clerk of the court, Miss Lawlah. Miss Lawlah was in the bed sick at that time, and I wanted to see her because she was very ill. She said, "Gloria, where's Earlene?" Now, Earlene is my mom. I said, "Well, Earlene is dead." She said, "She's dead?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, how long did she teach school?" I said, 44 years. Now, that's pretty good, isn't it? Worked 44 years in the public school system. So Ms. Moll said, "Well, that's nothing. I was clerk of the court for 57 years. I chew on that. So now, that's, you know, Heinz 57, I keep that in mind. That's okay, Heinz 57 is Ms. Moll. So I'm working on, I think now I have 49 years. But you know what my goal is. I got, that's right, at least 57. I got to get up there this time. So I say good morning to all of you. I bring you greetings from the Maryland Department of Aging and welcome you back to Annapolis. It's always good to see you in Annapolis. And it's good for you to be seen in Annapolis by the Assembly. This is a tough year. The governor's budget is out. There'll be many, many controversial issues to be debated on the House and Senate floor. Maybe I'm kind of glad I'm sitting over there in Baltimore and not down here on the floor. But Maryland, I know you know we administer many programs to help our seniors and families. And we're always there. And you're always there with us. And I have some good news this morning because one of the most valuable of these programs is the Medicaid Older Adults Waiver. Let me say this about Medicaid too. Medicaid, you heard Nancy talk about Maryland being a very wealthy state. We are just about at the top. We're number one. And our public school system is number one. As is it ought to be with the amount of money. I'm from South Carolina, which is a very poor state. There's no money there compared to the money here, believe you me. And there are no programs. When I think of our senior centers, I go around and look at those centers. They are fabulous here in Maryland. And it just brings tears to my eyes. We deserve it, but we've got it too. When I go home, it's very different. But I want to say this about Medicaid in Maryland, because Maryland does have the budget and the money. When that federal money comes in on Medicaid, there's a formula. So Maryland being a wealthy state, we pay 50 cents for every 50 cents that the Fed sends us. Now that's not true in Louisiana and Mississippi and Alabama, which is what Nancy talked about. They get a different formula. Maybe they get 80 cents out of the dollar, and they pay 20 because that's all they can afford to pay. But I say that to remind you that Medicaid we think of as a federal program. It is. But remember, state dollars are going into that program. So just keep that in mind. Every time you talk about a dollar for Medicaid, you're talking about 50 cents out of the state money to match it. Now the Medicaid older adults waiver, a lot of you call in, you want to know about this waiver. It's a wonderful program, and it provides services to persons with long-term care needs, and they can have that done at home in the community. You know, we are going back community-based now. We're trying to empty out the nursing homes. Everybody wants to come home out the nursing home. We're trying to accommodate them. Don't you want to stay in your own home as long as you can? Of course you do. I do too. I'm trying to figure it out. I talk to my husband about it all the time. Well, what if? What if this happens? What happens? Something happens to me or you. What are we going to do? We discuss this at the dinner table. You know, we're trying to figure it out because we're living longer. And we want to stay home-based as long as we can. Now, this waiver, it can be a little bit expensive, but guess what? It's much less expensive than that body, same body, going and staying in the nursing home. So whenever we do the waiver, and we take a person to put them on the waiver, it cuts the cost of long-term care to the state of Maryland. And don't forget, we are putting up 50% of that cost from state dollars. So I'm very proud to announce to you this morning that the governor, our very dear Governor O'Malley, has committed funding in his proposed budget, this very controversial budget we're talking about, to expand the older adults waiver to serve an additional 300 persons. That's very big. That's 10% increase. So I want you to keep that in mind because as families call us, we've got somebody, or my husband, or I, or whatever's happening. We're looking at that waiver. The waiver is wonderful because the waiver allows you to have the wraparound services. And you know, as we grow older, you can think of the things that you need. You need a personal caregiver sometimes after you get a little bit weaker. And you've got to have a proper diet, right? And you've got to have a place to stay. And someone to look in on you every now and then. Those are the things that we know. And as we grow older, that's what's going to happen to our bodies. Those are the needs that are out there. But this waiver is a fabulous program in Maryland. And so I want to thank Governor O'Malley, he's not here this morning, for doing that for us. And we are working very closely with the Medicaid money is over in the health department. For those of you who are worried about our budget, what has happened, when we got Louise Foster, we shifted that money back over to DHMH. But we have the workers sitting up on the 10th floor in State Center and the Department of Aging. So that waiver has been increased by 10%. And then we have increased funding for the living at home waiver. And that one serves, as you know, your non-elderly adults and persons with disabilities who are 18 years old and older. Now, those of you who are advocates out here, I say to you, thank you, because you have worked around the clock. You've talked to the legislature, and you've talked to the governor and his staff, and you have pushed for this funding to be increased so that we can include more people in the waivers. And so this year's expansion has occurred because of many of you and what you've been able to do. And so we thank you on behalf of the families who will be making use of the expanded numbers. And we really need that here in the state of Maryland. Thank each and every one of you. Finally, I want to invite all of you to National Harbor. Now, how many of you have been down to National Harbor down in Prince George? So I see some hands. Now, you know, when I was a state senator, that was one of the projects that I pushed. I went over to Nashville. I looked at Gaylord. I went in there. I stayed. We went incognito and went all through there looking at it. saying, my goodness, I wonder if we could bring this to the shores of the Potomac. And of course, I came back home, and although we had some people say, oh, I think it's a good idea, guess what the majority of people said? Lord, are you out of your mind? How are you going to do that? They thought I was bringing a country and western hotel over there and put it on the Potomac. But I had to remind them I'm a country girl, and so there's a lot of country and western in me, you know? And so I like my boots and my cowboy hats and all of that. And I even go to the concerts, you know. So, but when they came over here, they of course made that venue look more like the international capital of the world, Washington, D.C. And it is fabulous. So this year, during the month of May, which is Older Americans Month, Older Maryland's Month, we're going to have this fabulous Expo 2012. Now what I want to see, I want to see all of you get a little flyer. I don't know whether you have a little flyer. Mike, we got the flyers. I want everyone here to have a flyer because I want them to come down. This is going to be a fabulous event, and we're organizing all over the state to get you there. If you're in a senior center, that center probably will be running a bus. Am I correct, Mike? To come down there. And it's going to be, I think, around the first weekend in May. We have the dates for it already. And so May 3rd through 5th, we're going to have fun down there at Gaylord at the Gaylord Hotel and Conference Center. And it's all about us. It's all about our families. It's about our children who are planning for us and planning for their own retirements. It's about the baby boomers. It's about Zumba. It's about all the things. Maybe we even have some old card games in there. You know, I love to play bridge and poker and all that too. So we don't know. We're going to have a little bit of everything in there. And it's going to be for you. I've been thinking about Paula D. You know, I love Paula. Now, they're fussing at Paula, but that's my girl. But you know, I'm out of Carolina. And you know, we love to cook not only butter, but lard. You know, we cook lard down in Carolina. And my mother knows from the hog farm down in Orangeburg County. So you know, we got the hog going real strong out of Carolina. And so when Paula's up there cooking, I'm right there with her, you know. I'm watching every movie she's making. And of course now, we know that Paula is, she's diabetic. Well, a lot of us are diabetic. My husband's a diabetic. And he was from Illinois. He wasn't down there cooking with us down in the hog farm. But he's still a diabetic. And so we have medications for that. We know we have to exercise and do all those things. But we're going to bring all of that into Expo 2012. We're going to be talking about it. And so I want to thank AARP. I see the shirts here this morning. Because guess what? You're one of our big partners in this. AARP is in the partnership with us to have this Expo 2012. It's all about seniors. It's all about us. It's our day. We're important. You better believe it. When you hear the Republicans and Democrats up there arguing and carrying on, I haven't heard much. I didn't even hear Gingrich or the other one say anything about Social Security. They were arguing down there in Florida. They didn't say a word about Social Security very much or about Medicare. I said, yeah, they get the message. They know what to leave alone. I don't matter who goes up there in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, they still got to deal with us. You know what? They got to deal with us. So I'm not even worried about it. I want to welcome Mayor Harding, who is now a member of the State Commission on Aging. Mayor, why don't you stand up and just wave your hand out there? He's a wonderful catch. We caught him involved, we reeled him in, and we worked him out in a different way this time. We really thank you for being available to us. Now I've said all that, and I'm going to say to you, I love you very much. You have a fine staff on the 10th floor over at the State Center in Baltimore City. You have 19 offices across the state of Maryland. We are working hard for you. There's nothing we wouldn't do for you because we are you. I am you, and we are together in this. And so you better believe it. This girl from Carolina is going to look at you. Thank you so much, and God bless you and your families. Good health, much happiness in 2012. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary Lawlah. Again, someone who needs no introduction. Is your president, your chairman, both? Ed Meyerson.
That says a whole lot. You know, each year we give an award to the champion for seniors. And this year, Gloria. No,
sneaky Pete. Can you believe it?
Well, you know, I started
Get
to,
that in on me.
I'm sneaky.
You are.
You know, when I went to do a biography so I could say something, it was too long. And everybody knows you anyway, so I thought I'd tell a story. Okay? What was this, 5 or 6 years ago? And there's a point to the story, and I'll get to the point. About 5 or 6 years ago, at a Thanksgiving luncheon in Howard County, Gloria and I did a little dancing. Remember that? She never lets me forget it, is what happened. But the point of that story is that wherever seniors are, Gloria's there. Whether it's Baltimore County, Allegheny County, it doesn't make any difference. You've been there all over, right? If there's a sign that says seniors, you look underneath it, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the name of Gloria Lawlah. So it's really my pleasure and my honor to present you with a plaque that says, in recognition of her efforts to maintain and enhance the well-being of Maryland seniors, United Seniors of Maryland bestows upon Gloria G. Lawlah the title Champion for Seniors, January 24, 2012.
Thank you, thank you.
You know, it's fun to be able to give something to somebody who's as worthy of it as you. Thank you so much.
Remember I told you Mike and Mike, the seniors? That other Mike is here. That's the president of the Senate, my dear friend Mike Miller.
And the other award, which I'm pleased to give, is an annual award to somebody who does the most for United Seniors. This year there wasn't any contest. You know, if you want to know something about United Seniors, you can go online to our webpage, but you can also now go to Facebook, you can Twitter, and you can go on YouTube, and you'll be able to see some of these proceedings on YouTube. We have a new membership management program, which is difficult as it is, would have been impossible without it. So with many, many thanks, I would like to have you welcome our newest vice president, because we made an office. I mean, we couldn't contain him without having an office of IT. And so, Bruce, would you come up here and accept an award? This award says, President's Award presented to Kenneth Bruce Emmerling, in grateful appreciation and recognition of his dedication and excellent work on behalf of the United Seniors of Maryland, January 24, 2012.
Pleasure to really work with USM and Meyerson and everybody. It's really been a great experience. I'm really glad to have been able to serve and help out.
And I'm just going to take about 2 minutes and tell you, my term in office as president will expire this coming spring. It will have been 4 years of a lot of fun, a lot of grief, a lot of progress. You've accomplished a lot. And you know, I wish I could give one more huge award to all of you who are out there. Because whatever we've done, it's been because of you, by you and for you. And without you, United Seniors of Maryland wouldn't be the force that it is. And so, as the last time of being able to address you as President of the United Seniors, I want to say thank you very, very much.
I'd like to present you with a cut for the Earlier this morning, you met the two leaders from the House of Delegates. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to the leaders in the State Senate, the upper body. Thomas V. Mike Miller is the longest-serving State Senate President in the United States. Been doing this for 41 years, I believe, right? Not-so-silent minority is E. Pipkin, senator from the Upper Eastern Shore and the minority leader in the U.S. Senate.
Okay, first of all, let me just say I'm honored to be here. I thank Lou for that introduction. I'm glad you got the two senior members of the press to handle this. They've been around a long time, and they know quite a few stories that they can tell themselves. One story that they both heard me tell before, I was giving a commencement at the University of Maryland College Park, and the little co-ed who was introduced me at the same bio that Lou had, and she said Senator Miller was elected to the Maryland Senate in 1974. And before that, he served one term in the Maryland. They were supposed to say she was elected in 1974, and she's supposed to say before that he served one term in the Maryland House of Delegates with a red. And she got confused. She said Senator Miller was elected to the Maryland Senate in 1974, and before that he served one term in the Maryland House of Corrections. Being a Democrat means the Prince George's County. I hope that doesn't make you two, but anyway, it's always a pleasure to be here. One other anecdote, is people like if you're old like I am, and a historian like I am, I'm certainly a senior now. This time, years and years and years ago, I was in the Senate, and Jimmy Carter was president, and he was running for re-election. And just like it is now, it was very tough times. I mean, very tough times. Interest rates now are 3%, 4%. They were 13%. And the hostages were in Iran. They had hostages in Iran. Remember this? And then the farmers started marching on Washington. People from the Midwest were marching on Washington. And they had the tractors and the corn circling the Capitol. Well, anyway, a blizzard hit. And they had to find a place to put the farmers. So they called up the local fire departments around Washington, D.C. Can you house the farmers? Well, fortunately, unfortunately, one of my little volunteer fire companies gets to house a farmer. And I was snowed in here in Annapolis. I thank you for putting up with this, Senator, by the way. But I was snowed in here in Annapolis, and I get this emergency call from the chief of the fire department. He said, look, we have these farmers here with their equipment, and we need something to do. Then you get out during the day. Would you like your driveway plowed? I had horses, and no way to get back to my horses. So I thought, well, that's really a nice gesture. Because I got to get back to feed my horses. I was stuck in Annapolis. My wife was home with 5 kids and 4 horses. And I said, well, thank you very much. And so I got this emergency call from my wife an hour later. Come home immediately. I said, what's wrong? She says, there's this piece of equipment going up and down our driveway. I said, Patty, it's a piece of farm. She says, it's in our house. You've got to come home immediately. And she said, their neighbors are outside taking pictures. I said, Patty, they're probably like you, spoiled girl, never seen a piece of farm equipment. It's probably a corn picker. She said, but you don't understand, the television cameras are out there. I said, she said, but they've got signs on the equipment. I said, so what? There's probably some farmer wanting some more pay. She said, no, the signs say Jimmy Carter sucks. I
I'm a Democrat supporting Jimmy Carter. In front of my house, I said Jimmy Carter sucked. You know? My point in telling you this is a Jimmy Carter sucks time to be in government, okay, right now. And you're going to hear the negative side from my good friend, Senator Pipkin. He and I are friends. I'm from a more urban area, Prince George's County, and Culver County. He's from the rural area. And let me introduce him. Let him introduce himself, and we'll dialogue back and forth again.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. It is indeed an honor to be here with the Senate President. He certainly brings his unique perspective. And one thing to say about the Senate President, he comes to play every day, okay? Every day. And we certainly know that as members of that august body. And we just have some differences of opinion, little differences in policy. So we can talk about some of them here today. But at the end of the day, I think we're all about moving the state of Maryland forward. I think it's an idea that many times we may go at it, and over time, some of the ideas from the other side seem to get accepted by our side, and some of the ideas that in any one given year may be seen as, gee, that's just not workable. And you find over time, the longer that you're here, that some of those unworkable ideas indeed end up bearing fruit. And we've worked together on a number of issues over the years that we think have moved the state forward. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning and look forward to the dialogue.
In case you couldn't tell, when the Senate President comes into the room, he's basically in control. They asked me to ask some questions. I know Mike Miller's his hair was red and curly, and Senator Pipkin, since he had hair and mustache. Needless to say, I don't have to tell you that the Senate President is a senior citizen. But as we started out with Mike Busch and Tony O'Donnell, what is your view of how the state budget impacts the senior citizens in this room?
Well, I think Senator Lawlah had it exactly correct. Newt Gingrich last night and Mitt Romney were going at each other back and forth. Rick Santorum was trying to get in a little bit. But at no time did they mention issues affecting the seniors. At no time did they talk about home health care. No time did they talk about nursing homes. At no time did they talk about Medicaid. And they realize that this is the most reliable population. This is the backbone of our country right here. I'm just stroking the fact of life. And so the question is, in terms of our budget, how does it adversely affect seniors? It does not. You're well written, you're well read, you're well spoken. You understand what's happening in Europe. You understand what's happening in Greece and Spain, and these countries who are not dependent on a country that overran a number of them in Germany to bail them out. The same is happening in the United States on a lesser extent. You understand what we talked about Florida last night. 14% unemployment, 40% of the houses are underwater with the mortgages. Our state is doing very well. Our state is doing very, very well. We're the #1 state in the union in terms of prosperity. The #1 state in terms of less poverty than any other state. We're Maryland. We're very fortunate to be located around the nation's capital. #1 in education, AAA bond rating. So it's a very good state. Now, could we do better? Absolutely. And Senator Pipkin is going to tell you ways that he thinks that we can do better. But right now, our budget is balanced. The governor's trying to do certain things. And he asked for us to increase the sales tax. We said no. It's an aggressive tax on people that can least afford it. And so we look forward to having to deal with the budget, balance it, without adversely affecting our most precious resource, and that's our seniors.
I think some of the challenges we face really is that the state of Maryland right now is involved into two parts of the state, really geographically driven. Those parts of the state that have a significant federal presence with a significant amount of federal spending have actually weathered this economic downturn reasonably well. When you look at other parts of the state, particularly the rural parts and some of the suburban parts of the state, these are some of the toughest economic times that people have seen in 50 years, if not longer. And so it's that dichotomy that comes together in Annapolis, where you have people that say, you know what, people can afford to pay more because times are okay. And yet, other parts of the state and other parts of our society are saying, you know what, I'm faced with the idea of how do I pay for my food? How do I pay for my utilities? How do I pay for my medicine? And how do I make ends meet? And here, in the first couple of days of this new session, those ideas clearly have collided. Because the governor, in that short period of time, has put forward the following proposals: to phase out itemized deductions for mortgage interest, medical deductions, charity deductions for 500,000 Maryland filers. Phasing out the personal exemptions for nearly 500,000 Maryland filers. An internet tax, at least a doubling of the flush fee. A commitment to wind power, what I call Maryland's Solyndra. The president gave $500 million to Solyndra. Our governor, based on the Public Service Commission's response to his wind proposal last year, proposed to charge consumers up to $2 billion more over 20 years. The governor floated a 7% sales tax, an increase in the tobacco tax base, an increase in the coal tax, an increase on telecom companies, and a slashing of commissions for lottery agents, a promise of a gas tax increase later this year that not only is expected to be maybe as much as 15 cents, but indexed. We know that no matter, even if your Social Security is indexed, it's never indexed enough to match what your expenses are. So think about a tax that you have to pay week in, week out. It would never have to come back to the General Assembly for review again because it would be indexed. An increase in the registration fee. There's talk about expanding what the sales tax is applied to. That's just in the first 2 weeks of session. So ladies and gentlemen, people stand in front of you and say that they want to do a balanced approach. Balanced on the back of who? Certainly not the people in this room that are facing tough economic times or fixed income or higher expenses for the basics of life. And that, I think, is a view that we need to be talking about in Annapolis over the next 80 days.
And we are talking about it. And the reason the governor's talking about it is because the governor has said, look, Harriet and Harriet homeowner have to balance their budget. Our economy is coming out of it. It's the worst recession since the Depression. Okay, it's the worst worldwide situation since the Depression. We're out of the recession now, but we're slowly climbing out of it. Our income taxes revenues are up, our sales tax revenues are up. But guess what? We still aren't where we were 4 years ago. And we've got a lot to do. But at the same time, Medicaid keeps growing year after year, doesn't it? We have a commitment to education. We're the #1 state in the union in terms of education. #1, 4 years in a row. This is our best resource in the whole world, education. Our colleges, we've taken them from the 7th most expensive college system in the United States now to the 27th. That takes money. And as we have these ongoing revenue expenditures, these ongoing commitments, our revenues are down, so guess what? We say to the governor, we have a deficit. Last year we had a $2 billion deficit, we want you to cut it in half. He cut it in half. This year we have the $1 billion deficit. We said, Governor, take 2 years, but reduce it by half. So he's reduced the $1 billion deficit by half. He's cutting the budget, okay? He's cutting the budget, but at the same time, he's asking those that can do more to do more. Those people that are in a different bracket, the exemptions and reductions. I promise you, the General Assembly will have hearings on these matters, and we'll come to a conclusion that will be somewhere in between what the distinguished senator from the Eastern Shore is talking about and the governor. But we're not going to be taxing anybody out of their homes. People are already living in homes that they can't afford, and we're not going to be asking people to do more. In terms of the gas tax, it does not poll well. It doesn't poll well for anybody. If you ask the people in the state, they would say 7.5 out of 10 people are going to say, we're against it. We're against it. But people elect leaders to lead, and they elect people to spend political capital where they have to, where it's the right thing to do for the state. The last time the gas tax was raised was 1992. 1992, it was 5 cents a gallon. Well now, folks, you raise gas 1 cent a gallon, raise $30 million. 5 cents a gallon, raise $150 million. I have people in my area that want a bridge between St. Mary's and Calvert County. A bridge. Pax River is right there. It's a huge thing in terms of homeland security. That bridge alone costs $750 million. You see? It cost us more to replate the Chesapeake Bay Bridge than it did to build the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. The distinguished senator over here from the Eastern Shore, he complains about the tolls. Well, guess what? The tolls on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, as high as they are now, are lower than when they were when the bridge was built, back in the 50s. You know, so you got to take all these factors into consideration and recognize, again, that this is a wealthy state, lowest in terms of poverty. We've got the greatest environment here. We've got the greatest educational system, AAA bond rating. We've got the most well-educated workforce in the entire United States. We have more doctorate degrees here in Maryland than any other state in the union per capita. More land preserved per capita than any state in the union. It's a great state. It's well governed. We need to keep it well governed. And we're going to continue to work with my good friend over here to make it so.
Well, I guess you know, the definition of tough decision is open for debate. Now, how tough is it for government to take its powers and decide to take more cash out of your pocket? See, I don't think that's a tough decision. I think that's the easy decision. The facts are, that if you look at the governor, when he proposed his first budget in 2008, the total state budget was about $30 billion. The budget that he proposed last week is $35.9 billion. That's not cutting spending. As a matter of fact, over his term, the state budget under this governor has increased double digits. So on one hand, tax rates have gone up. On the other hand, the spending hasn't come under control. Now, there may be programs that he wanted that he didn't necessarily get, but overall spending in the state has continued to grow. You know, the gas tax increase. Why do we want to walk into one of your worst nightmares? You know, when this administration came to power in Washington, the average price of regular fuel was $1.79. $1.79 3 years ago. Today, you leave here, you'll pay between $3.40 in the Annapolis suburbs and higher in the Washington suburbs for regular gas. You've already taken the hit. You've already been taxed on your fuel. It's doubled in price, and you're making the adjustments in your personal life to do that. But there's another discussion about transportation we need to have before we ask you for more dollars. It's how we spend the current money that we get. Billions of dollars from the Transportation Trust Fund every year. Right now, we spend 45% of our operating dollars on just 3% of the miles traveled in our subway systems. And yet, the governor has committed to us that if we have a gas tax increase, we're not going to see it for roads that you drive on. We're going to see it for a purple line and a red line in Baltimore City. I applaud the fact that we're going to get it, but the fact of the matter is, from the rest of the state's perspective, we're going to lose 65 cents of every operating dollar on that, and the price tag on those two projects alone is $4 billion. So the idea that we're going to be able to fix those intersections, fix those interchanges throughout the state, we need to set our priorities better with the current money that we spend. On top of that, the State Auditing Department came back and took a hard look at the way we spend the current dollars that flow under the Transportation Trust Fund and the State Highway Administration in particular. And all I could say is, if you ran your personal budget the way the State Highway Administration and the auditors came back about having contracts with no terms as far as length, no terms about scope of work, creating $36 million slush funds of money within the State Highway Department. And the governor, before he comes to you and asks for more of your hard-earned dollars, you've got to make sure that we're spending the current dollars that we give him in the right way.
Well, they called me the moderator, but maybe I should just be the referee and throw a flag around. What do you, last week, Senator Miller, from the rostrum, you mentioned that the governor has floated this proposal about income taxes, which affects about 20% of the population. And you mentioned that he did it without consultation. Sounds to me like you're going to have a hard time with that proposal in the Senate.
Well, you know, folks, the governor proposed, the governor's the leader of the state. And he's my friend, he's a great leader, just like my good friend, Senator Pipkin is my good friend. He comes from a county of 100,000 people. It's not really unlike Page County in South Carolina, where Senator Gloria Lawlah came from, in terms of, you know, I was up there a year ago and I dedicated a sewage treatment plant. And I mean, it was a big deal up in Cecil County. And we need Cecil County, just like we need Allegheny County and Worcester County, and all the counties, 23 counties in the state. But also, you know, I also come from a county with 800,000 people, Prince George's County. There's Prince George's, Montgomery, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, and Annapolis County. And the governor's got to take listen to the needs of the people as a whole. Needs the people as a whole. And again, as unpopular as it is, people clap, hoot, and holler, I don't want no damn gas tax. Guess what? The Washington metropolitan area is the most congested area in the entire United States of America. Most congested in the entire United States of America. Those of you who live in the Baltimore region, it's the longest commute time in the United States. I had an event in Cockeysville several weeks ago. It took me 3.5 hours to get from Southern Maryland to Cockeysville. You're trying to get around the Washington Beltway, trying to get to 95, trying to get around the Baltimore Beltway in rush hour with rain. And that shouldn't be there. It's a quality of life issue. It's an economic development issue. And you got to give the governor credit for proposing. Now it's up to the General Assembly to dispose. And I have to deal with my good friend, people like this who say, no, 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 no. Well, guess what? What are you for? What are you for? How do we move forward? How do we come to the middle? And that's what we haven't had yet. We haven't had the hearings. We haven't had the debate. And we're going to try to reach Maryland, which is in the middle state in terms of low tax. Forbes says we're 14th in terms of business. You know, number 1 in terms of wealth, number 1 in terms of least poverty, 14th in terms of business attraction. It's a great state. It's a great state. And I know that my good friend the senator knows it's a great state, but he's representing the opposition party. So after all the debate, we're going to try to come together and work together and fashion a compromise. Now, being a member of the Republican Party, he's not going to vote for any tax increase. No Republican in the Senate is going to vote for any tax increase. They're not going to vote for any fee increase, although they did when Governor Ehrlich was governor, didn't they? They voted for a flush tax increase, a transportation tax increase. But now we have a Democratic governor, they're not going to do that. So they're going to say, no, no, no. So I'm going to say, my good friend, Senator Pipkin, what are you for? Well, I'm for this cut, I'm for that cut, I'm for this cut, and that cut. I say, fine, we'll take cuts A, B, and C, and I know you're not going to vote for revenues, but I got to go to the 32 Democrats to say, okay, what revenues can you for? I need 24 of you to vote for some revenues. And that's what's going to happen. That's the only way we're going to get at it. So we get 24 or 32 Democrats to vote for some revenues, and I'm going to try to get 24 or 32 Democrats plus the Republicans to vote for some cuts, and the state will continue to be the happy place it always has been.
I guess, Mr. President, I guess the way I would respond to that is, I stand for, let's stop digging the hole, okay? We keep digging the hole deeper and deeper. Every year you come here and you go through this year, there's a structural deficit. We talk about the budget at the beginning, and we keep digging the hole deeper and deeper. And I, along with my colleague, Western Maryland Senator Brinkley, sat down and went through the budget the last 2 years and be able to show how we could close the structural deficit without raising taxes. And as a matter of fact, the Senate President and I are united on one part of the governor's proposal this year that the Senate President has talked about for years, and Senator Brinkley and I also put forward. And we took the heat on the area of teachers' pensions and trying to make the counties more accountable for what they spend. So where that goes this year, it's been proposed by the governor, the Senate President. I pledged to work with the Senate President to make that happen, to make the counties more accountable as to how they fully cost out their education. So we kind of have already been through, you know, the challenge always is, well, what would you cut? Well, we've laid it out the last 2 years. And I'm happy to say that some of that has been incorporated into the discussion, and we'll continue to do that. But I see a different kind of Maryland than the one that's evolving right now. You know, you've had this conversation over your dinner tables or at your family gatherings, because with the taxes that I just mentioned, if we go back and talk about all the taxes that were raised in 2007, you remember that one, the tax increase to end all tax increases. Now we're back talking about new ones now. It's the idea that, you know, the state of Maryland is really evolving into a place in which people are here only because they have to be here. And you know, I see a different kind of state. One in which we really want the people that are here because they want to be here. And they want to take advantage of the beautiful state and its resources. But if we continue in a tax policy mode in which we take people at all income levels and tax them to some of the highest tax rates in the state. You know, you can imagine today when you're having this discussion about trying to bring jobs to the state of Maryland, and you're leaning across the table and you're so proud to talk about the beauty of the state and the education of the state now and the research that takes place in the state, some of the best medical facilities in the world that we see. And then you lean across the table and you go to close the sale to get that company to move here and bring their hundreds of jobs. And you have to say, oh, by the way, you make above $100,000 a year, $150,000 you and your wife together, your mortgage deduction isn't going to count so much in Maryland. The charity deduction isn't going to count so much in Maryland. You know, your medical expenses above a certain level aren't going to count so much in Maryland. Do you think that company comes in? Or they take a look at what's going on in Virginia and Delaware and Pennsylvania and surrounding states and say, you know what, I love the state, it's beautiful. But maybe I just won't come. And that's the part that on the margin, that's we want to get, because we want to attract those people. My concern is that the governor's proposed in the last 10 days moves us in a different direction.
To wrap up, I think you've got a flavor where these people stand. Just switching the topic and with your closing remarks, because both of them are busy guys, and we've lost some time here. The same-sex marriage, the speaker and Tony O'Donnell talked about that. You're personally opposed to that, Mr. President, but your Senate is probably going to vote for it again. And where does the Republican caucus stand on it?
Well, let me just say this. Before I talk to that issue, just don't take my word for it. Don't take Senator Pipkin's word for it. Just go to like retirement.com. You can find anything on the internet. Anything. Just Google and go to retirement.com, and then look for the best places to retire. And look at the states you don't want to retire, and you don't want to retire in the Middle East, rather the Midwest. You definitely want to retire in the Middle East. I was in front of a Baptist group the other day. When you get old, you do stuff like that. You know, folks, they tell you. I want to say his eyes on the sparrow's eyes. That's his eyes on the shower. The things like you slip. You don't want to retire in the Midwest. You don't want to retire in the Northeast. And there's all the states where you don't want to retire. They take in all the good things, climate and things. But then they look at the tax policies. They look at the tax policy. They look at where the state budget is. What places where the budget's underwater, and where things are really in bad shape. Florida, New York, California, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Connecticut. You know, they list all these states that you don't want to retire because things are not going well there. Things are going well here. And one of the advantages that we have in our state is that we have a diversity of opinion. Diversity of opinion. We encourage a diversity of opinion. Okay. And I am what I am on this issue, and I voted that marriage between a man and a woman in 1972. I created the law. It says a marriage between a man and a woman. When I was in the House of Delegates. And I don't see any reason to change. My parents were married for 50 years. I'm the oldest of 10 children. The oldest of 10 children, all in public schools, land-grant colleges. And I have 5 children of my own. I have 13 grandchildren. I'm a traditionalist. And I think marriage is very important between a man and a woman for the purpose of civilization. And marriage is important. They have children. Man, you need 2 parents to raise a family. And it's my personal belief, and I stick to it. But at the same time, I respect others who have a different view. So I voted for every bill or option to allow people who think differently to have the benefits of marriage that go along with marriage. And I think it's a compromise in my mind. I have a senator in the Senate who's a friend of mine who has a spouse the same sex as himself, and they have 2 adopted children. And the 2 adopted children were on the floor of the Senate this morning. And I recognize that there are 5 other states, or 6 other states, some through the judiciary and others that have done it through legislative act that have a different policy. But if they're going to do it in Maryland, they're not going to do it with my vote. At the same time, if people want to filibuster, then what I'm going to do is try to bring them out to a vote so that the majority, whatever the bill is, the majority, whatever the will is, can prevail. Because again, I have different differences. I have 5 kids. I have pro-choice children, and I have 1 child that my grandchildren were marching the Right to Life yesterday in Washington, D.C. You know, so I mean, you let kids, you educate them, and you encourage them to do what they think best. You know, and that's what we kind of do in this state. Is try to let everybody have free thinkers. And like I say, my prediction is the issue will pass the Senate, and I'm not sure what will happen to it in the House.
I
think we will have another emotional debate in the Senate, similar to what we had last year. I think it was enlightening for all sides, and that people came to the table with very strong opinions. But we conducted that discussion with great dignity. I thought it was one of the Senate's shining moments as far as bringing people of very different backgrounds and opinions together to be able to discuss it. At the end of the day, you know, it should have been settled for this term, because the people really haven't changed in either house, and that we shouldn't be, you know, it should come back after the next election, after people have a choice where the votes are on the record and people can decide if that's an overriding issue, or they want to send somebody back who's made that decision. But I don't think that's the way this will play out. Very well, at the end of the day, if it does pass, if it does pass the Senate, it does pass the House. All likelihood is that this will go to referendum. And when it goes to referendum, the history's been, at least to date, that any state that's put this to referendum has voted for any change that marriage is between a man and a woman. And so, as I was on a panel yesterday, said, well, Maryland may break the streak. Clearly, opinions sharply divided. I will say the people that, while there are very strong feelings on both sides, the people that are the most organized and that have a tremendous amount of passion, I think, will be the side that says that, no, we're not going to change the existing law. But we'll see. I think at the end, I think there's an excellent chance that this will be decided by the citizens of Maryland.
Let's give a round of applause for these two gentlemen.
Thank you both very much. We have come to the end of our program, basically, and I think we ought to give a round of applause to Ted Meyerson and his team for putting together a fascinating. Now it's time for you all to go to work. You're going to be meeting with your legislators. You're going to be talking to them one-on-one and in groups about what your concerns are, and kind of lay all that out for you. I'm going to bring up two of your members to talk to you about how that's all going to work. Don Solars and Tammy Bresnahan. Are you here?
I'm not on the program now, but I just couldn't let the meeting go without thanking our moderator and our MC. It was really great of you. Thank you very, very, very.
Good morning. I'm Don Sillers. I'm Vice President for Legislation of United Seniors of Maryland. And this morning what I do is Tammy Bresnahan, who's the Associate Director of Advocacy for AARP Maryland, which I understand is one of the larger organizations in United Seniors. She joined AARP in November. And prior to being on the AARP staff, she worked for the Maryland Department of Human Resources for over 26 years, where she was the Director of Government Affairs and responsible for all legislative and regulatory issues. Programs at Department of Human Resources are administered through the local departments of social services. Tammy is a graduate of Salisbury University and serves as the university's vice president of the Board of Alumni Affairs. And she was recognized by 3 different governors for outstanding public service to Maryland citizens. And Tammy,
good morning. Yes, I started working under Harry Hughes, Governor Harry Hughes, but he didn't recognize me then. I was too young. I heard somewhere the most important political office is that of a private citizen. You are the best voice for your issues, for our issues. Legislators listen to their constituents, and at AARP we do too. As you may know, AARP has 4 areas of focus or priorities, identified primarily by the membership and what is important to them, and that they age in the quality of life that is respectful and dignified. We know that Marylanders 50 plus are concerned about their retirement, health needs and services, and rising cost of those services. These are basic to living, but they are increasingly threatened, and it does not give them a peace of mind, independence, or quality of life. That's why strengthening health and economic security is the overarching theme at AARP Advocacy. I believe we must meet that challenge head on, and with your help, we will. I'll start off with the first priority, my money. Protections of Social Security and Medicare must be protected. AARP works with policy. AARP works with policymakers to help them understand that preserving Social Security and Medicare is important to our members. Con artists and identity thieves are dangers that underscore the need for effective oversight of law enforcement. We believe in an effort to maintain what we have earned, consumers need adequate safeguards in a fast-changing world. So at the state level, we work with policymakers, the Attorney General's office, to make sure that laws are enforced, and if needed, laws passed that protect our investments and our money from those con artists and thieves. We will support bills that protect individuals and their hard-earned money and investments. The second priority for AARP is my health. As you have heard over and over again, AARP believes that Marylanders should have more support to live independently, and individuals with chronic health conditions and disabilities and their caregivers need better and more access to an array of long-term services and supports to help them stay in their homes as long as possible and live more rewarding lives. We know that this is what Marylanders want, and it is often less costly than institutional care. Marylanders need and should have more supports to live independently. We believe, and when it's needed, the safety net must stay sturdy for people of all ages and all incomes, families, and we will work to ensure those protections stay in place and that the application process is streamlined and seamless. AARP Maryland has been working with partners and policymakers to make sure that that money is appropriated for home and community-based services. The governor, as you have heard by Secretary Lawlah, I call her Senator Lawlah, has included funds for home and community-based care in the budget. That funding is being threatened as we speak. There is the lobby, the nursing home lobby is working against home and community-based care. We need to make sure that legislators know that aging in place is important to you and not to cut those funds or revert those funds or do anything with those funds. And in some cases, more funds are needed because we know it costs less. AARP is working with partners to support legislation that includes one revenue stream. That revenue stream includes increasing the tax on cigars and smokeless tobacco. Some of that revenue generated will support home and community-based services for Marylanders. As they need those supports, we know it'll be there. AARP Maryland has worked very closely with policymakers on the development of the health benefit exchange, making sure it is user-friendly. We will continue to work with policymakers and state agencies to ensure that as individuals age, these services are in place for older Marylanders and their families. The third goal, my home and family. A top goal for AARP is to ensure that as you, as a consumer, are protected. Our advocacy takes many forms. We want to make sure we are treated fairly in legislation and rulemaking and get our members the information to make good, sound choices. On the forefront of this is our work with utilities. AARP Maryland is vigilant with utility companies We are making sure rates are fair, markets are transparent, and services are reliable and stable, but most of all, responsive. That is why we took on BG&E when they wanted to charge you for smart meters, and that's why we have intervened in the Pepco rate case. And finally, the fourth and final priority not the final one, but the fourth priority that we look at for AARP, we believe as Marylanders get older, they want and need to stay involved in a full range of community life. Volunteering, working, participating in civic and faith-based activities, socializing, simply taking a walk, all enhance the quality of life and contribute to a physical and mental health well-being. AARP supports policies that help people keep connected to their communities as they get older, as they age. That includes a wide range of housing choices and health choices, making it easier and affordable to get around. AARP, Maryland Joint, other partners to support the Maryland Transportation Alliance. AARP supports more funding for mass transportation and paratransit services like minibuses so people can get where they need without having to drive if they can. And in closing, we believe these priorities bring us, a sense of security. I retired and started another job. I was 52 a week ago. I want to live as long as my mom did, 86. And I want my life to be just as good and long and healthy and to be able to stay in my home when I get sick or I need proper health care. Families are stronger when they age with a peace of mind about their health and their financial security, confident that they can get support and services they need to stay independent their whole lives. Institutions, other facilities are not supposed to be the first line. They're supposed to be the last choice. These will lead to a better life for all of us. As you meet with your elected officials today, make sure that they know that financial security and protections and access to health care and living independently and consumer protection are important. They need to tackle these policies now, right now. Right now, as I said before, the money allocated for the governor is trying to be lobbied away to the nursing home industry. And we need you to talk to your elected officials about keeping that money in place and making sure that that money is there when you need it, when you need to stay in your home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stan. Despite the fact that you are now retired, from our perspective, you are still very young. We now move on to the final phase of our program. Those of you who picked up the blue booklets as you came in will find two colored pieces of paper here. The first is, I'm not quite sure what shade of yellow this is, but it's labeled 2012 Talking Points for Caucuses. These represent the priorities of the United Seniors at the present time. Copies of these talking points were sent to the elected officials and delegates and senators, along with a note that we intended to have these form the basis of discussion today. So if you can look these over, you'll also notice that there is very much of an overlap between what Tammy was talking about as AARP priorities and the priorities of United Seniors, particularly in the aging in place, in health care, and in financial security. You also had in your booklet a blue piece, and this is a real blue, that gives the caucus locations. Everybody except Baltimore City will have to go out into the elements and also then into the security of the legislative offices. there are two delegations, Southern Maryland, Calvert, Charles and St. Mary's, and Howard County, that will be in the Miller Center office building. That means going across two streets, left, and then entering the Senate office building. Be sure you have your photo identification available, and going through the standard things of going through metal detectors. You will then be directed to the right to the two office buildings, to the two Senate meetings. The rest of us will be going to the House office building, which means that you go out across the street, up past the office building, make a left before crossing the bridge, and enter there, and you will be then directed to then go through security and you go through meeting rooms. Some of our caucus leaders have already left to go over to make sure everything is right at the caucus locations, but quite a few of them are still here. And we want to, I'll have them identify themselves so that you can hook up with them. Okay, the first is Anne Arundel, and that will be in room 142 of the Lowell House office building. And Virginia Crespo here is the leader of that delegation. Baltimore County is in room 180. Lowell office building. Or stays here, so at the back of the room. The Eastern Shore, Carolina, 600, Northridge, Kent, Queen, Somerset, and Worcester is in 318.
Oh, no problem.
I think everybody has the drill. Good luck with your